Idea Book. This is the tape number 7 for the month of December 1975, the Idea Book. Recorded by Verl Minto for Alpha Awareness Tape of the Month program. Distributed by the Alpha Awareness Tape Distribution Center. Post Office Box 8238, Spokane, Washington. Zip 99203. The Idea Book. This is an exciting concept that has come to us in the last 2 or 3 years of teaching that we feel can actually take the frustrations out of goal planning, take the frustrations out of what direction we're taking in our life, and make our goals very, very personal. Instead of depending on a counselor from an outside source in, letting your spiritual, your inside, brain-mind functioning do the counseling for you. We're totally convinced that the mind is working probably 2 years ahead in telling us, and perhaps a lifetime ahead, in telling us the direction that we should take, but we're not really consciously aware of what's delivering. As an example, we know that when you sleep at night, you have dreams every 80 to 90 minutes, and your mind will dream and record this information, deliver it to you, and if you consciously remember it, in a 6-minute dream, how much territory can you cover? It seems like you can go around the world a dozen times. You can live a lifetime. The mind works in that magnitude, and after we watch it for a while, we're seeing that the mind is doing that perhaps 2 to 3 to 4 hours a day when we're out in the midst of our physical environment. However, we never take time to record these, and that evening when we sit down in a chair, we think, what was that good idea that I had at 10 o'clock this morning? What was a good idea that I had at 10 o'clock, and we can't bring it back? You see, you're stopped at a stop sign. And the mind knows it's got a few moments to wander, so it wanders off in a direction for just a few moments, and you think, boy, that's a good idea, I ought to do something about that. Then the physical world gets back in the way, and it jerks you back, a horn blows behind you, and you drive another 10, 15 blocks, another red light turns red just as you get there, and the mind wants more, knows it's got the freedom to seek out for just a few moments. It goes out and makes a turn around, a swing, and you think, fantastic idea. Let's see, I was thinking about that about 10 blocks back. And you can't bring that back from 10 blocks back. Now, if you'd have taken time to record or write down, pull off the highway, and write down that idea that you had 10 blocks ago, and this idea, and maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and 10 o'clock that evening, if you'd write those down, you'll find that they have continuity. The same type of brain-mind functioning is going on perhaps 2 to 4 hours a day in little swatches and little pieces, but they're not put together, so we don't put a conscious chain of recording on them. But if you'll write those down, every creative idea, every idea that seems good, every idea that seems different, you will find that you can put those together at the end of a day, the end of a week, the end of a month, the end of 6 months, and they will tell you a story. And then it becomes a very beautiful thing because these are your ideas. They're personal. They're personal. So get you a notebook, and these notebooks should be in every walk of your life. You should have one in your purse or in your wallet, in your suit pocket. You should have one in the bathroom. The bathroom is a fantastic place for creative ideas. Several times a day you visit a bathroom. You're in there by yourself. It's private, and in a way, in a meditative state. And just being there, very quiet for a few moments, an idea may float out. Now, you must pin the idea down and then hear me, listen. From personal experience, when you pin that idea down, it's very light, it's a creative idea. Write the idea down and at least make 4 to 5 notations below it, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is what this idea means to me. Because it's an idea, it's only been thought of once perhaps, it's very light on the brain-mind functioning, and unless you detail it in some way, you'll look at it a month later and say, now what did this mean? I got some recall. You must detail it in enough detail that 6 months later when you look at it, it'll pull that pattern back from deep within the subconscious mind. But a book is necessary to be everywhere. As an example, all my life I was going to write a book. Now, I've known that all my life, and I was going to write it, and I locked myself up for 6 weeks one time to try to write that book. 6 total weeks. Pure frustration. Papers all over the floor. If anyone happened to show up, the mood of myself was not the greatest. In fact, 3 weeks after I got out of that 6-week stretch, stint in trying to write that book, my mood was not the greatest. But you see, last year, I kept an idea book. I kept one with me. I kept one in the glove compartment of the car. There was one in the bathroom, one in the front room. There was one in the car. And every place I went, the moment a creative idea, any new idea that I wasn't performing in my life came in, I wrote it down and then wrote A, B, C, D, E, F, G under it to describe it. Last Christmas, I put those like ideas together. And you know, one idea began to appear more and more, and each time I'd had the same idea, I had a different idea about it. It was a little different verbiage, a different idea. I separated those all out, put them on separate pieces of paper. And as a result, there was the title of the book, 11 chapters, including the ending chapter. You see, if you're going to write a book, it's already written, folks. All you have to do is to record it. All you have to do is record it. Those ideas for that book, it was fantastic how it happened. I was driving the motorhome across the state of Wyoming in February. It was in a very severe snowstorm, and the snow was blowing across the highway to the point you couldn't see that fine, dry snow. You couldn't tell the edges of the highways. It looked like a sea of snow. That perception of that snowstorm keyed that idea. And from that, I jotted it down. Now, in the motorhome, or when I'm driving, I find that a very creative place, especially if you're driving on a long trip, where you have time to relax and let your mind wander with the driving. And I found that you don't have time to really pull over and write them all down, and you never get to your destination. So I put a small recorder in a motorhome, just a portable recorder, and the moment the idea comes, I dictate it on the recorder. Then that evening or the next evening, I take time to write it down. It's necessary to get it out of the thinking world, to get it into the physical leg of the world, write it down. That doubly impresses it on your mind. So the first idea for that book came driving through that snowstorm across the state of Wyoming. The next idea, and I jot down at the end where the ideas came because it's interesting, the next idea for the book came while I was taking a shower in the city of Detroit. In fact, the idea book still had splotches of water that had dripped from my hair as I got out of the shower for just a moment to pen that idea. And let me impress upon you, if I may, that you must put the idea down. If you're in the middle of the shower and the idea comes, get it down at that moment. Get it down at that very moment. Because if you wait 5 minutes, it's like the dream that you remembered in the morning, and you were going to write it down, and so you waited until 2 o'clock till you had time, then couldn't recall. They're glimpses, they're very, very soft touches of the mind. Get them down at that moment in enough detail. The next idea for that book came while I was fishing in the Gulf of Texas. In fact, it was on the fishing boat, and I quit fishing to write down that idea. You see, become totally aware that as you walk through your daily routine, everything is perception. And as you perceive something, that can key a whole chain of events. As you look at a little child that has holes in his stockings as he's walking down the street, that could key a like feeling or a like understanding, information from your mind that you've seen before, that you have participated in for as a child. It's like Hemingway. Hemingway, I think, one of the greatest authors, and you know, it reams and reams of creative material fell out of that man's mind, just unfolded. But you know something? He traveled the world continually, and he wrote his experiences. He would go to the bullfights in Spain, and he wrote about those and let his imagination carry him. But you see, the bullfight keyed. That perception of a bullfight keyed that whole chapter. Then he was in a pub, and he wrote what he saw there. He wrote a street scene. He went on into another country and wrote that, and then he dovetailed these all together and made the bridges. You see, the book is already written. If you want to write it, just keep your ideas for 1 full year, and the book will be written. Be absolutely written. So write them all down. It's a master plan. How many people have had trouble trying to figure out your goals for the next 3 years or 2 years or even 6 months? I am convinced that if you'll keep your idea book, it has done it for me, that your goals actually will unfold for you. They'll unfold for you with no problem. Keep those ideas, coordinate all the ideas. Do it for 90 days. Do it for 60 days. Then separate all like ideas, put them down on a piece of paper, and the idea that appears in there the most tells you that the mind is already working on it. Now why don't you just get it through the physical body and claim it as a reward for yourself and get it out into the open? We've seen magnificent things happen. There was a young man in Spokane, Arthur, who was sort of floating, trying to find out what to do with his life and so on, took the class and took the idea book idea and began writing all these ideas down. And the idea that appeared in there the most was art. He'd like to do something with art, but consciously he knew that he didn't have any training. He hadn't been to school. He couldn't do the artwork. But as it kept appearing and reappearing more and more and more, he took that idea and plugged it into his life for just an hour a week. With discipline, an hour a week. This young man has made fantastic strides in this year, 1974 and 75. In fact, this year he has his own gallery in the city of Spokane. He just started painting 6 months ago. 6 months from this date back, approximately, he really began to give it a try. His creations are absolutely fantastic. He has now had a letter from Paris, France, inquiring to send slides about his pictures. One of the major chain stores in the United States is considering at this moment putting his pictures out as prints. And it all happened because he kept his ideas down. The mind is known. This man wanted to paint from the day he was born. He just consciously didn't realize this. You see, the mind is dreaming at least 4 hours a day. Call it a daydream. And those fantastic ideas come. But something gets in the way to interrupt us, and we don't get the idea down, and then we can't remember them. So get an idea book in every room of the house, in every part of your house, and write it down. Any goals you have, creative ideas. How many of you are getting creative ideas that are so far-fetched there's no use doing anything about them anyway? People, write it down, write it down. World knowledge doubled from 1800 to 1900. It took it 100 years to double. Then in the 1900s, it doubled in 47 years, they tell us. Then it's doubling now on a 17-and-a-half-year cycle. And they say in 1985 the total world knowledge will double in 3.5 months. So you see, in 1985, if total world knowledge doubles in 3.5 months, that idea that is 100 years ahead of time right now, in 1985, perhaps is going to be 10 years behind time. Now think of it just a moment. If I'd have walked into your house 40 years ago and I had have said, we're going to land a man on the moon in about 15 years, you'd have said, what? Oh, no way. If I walked into your home today and said, I have an idea how to land a man on Mars in about the next 7 years, you'd say, well, that's possible. You see, the world is ready for some of those far-out ideas. Leonardo da Vinci had an idea to build a helicopter 500 years ago. He drew a picture of that helicopter, and those people who knew airplane construction say it would have flown if there'd been a motor around to drive it. He didn't frustrate anybody on it. He simply drew a picture of it, put it in his files. And it's hanging in the Wright-Patterson Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. You can see a picture of it there. You see, the idea was there. Who got us on the moon? Who put us on the moon? The creative idea is coming from a man. And remember, everything starts with a creative idea. Everything. The clothes you're wearing, somebody dreamed them up. The glasses that you see on the other person's face, somebody dreamed up. The chair you're sitting in, somebody dreamed up before they created it so we could use it in this dimension. So everything starts with creativity. It starts within the mind, within the spirit within, and perhaps from universal knowledge, intelligence. It's not too important where it comes. It's delivered to you. Then write it down and claim it and do something with it. These creative ideas got us on the moon. In fact, what happened to get us on the moon? Who was the first person to start us toward landing on the moon? Space comics. There was somebody who had the idea, science fiction, of landing on the moon. So he wrote down all his ideas. It was too early to deliver them to the world in any logical way, so he made them into a funny book. And the von Brauns and the young people who are now in the space program, turning us toward Mars, turning us toward the galaxies out in the future, are those young men who read space science fiction. Somebody had the idea, and if you'll go back and read some of those old comic books, you'll find the idea, and the pictures within the comic books is almost exactly the same hardware as we're using today. So no matter how wild the idea is, in fact, maybe that's the best, like a new energy source. Who's going to discover the new energy source? I'm convinced it's going to be somebody sitting down, just writing down their ideas. their creative ideas. It's going to be somebody driving across the state of Wyoming in a snowstorm, and it'll be delivered to them, and if they're wise enough to write it down, and the next idea, put those pieces of the puzzle together, then that'll be the energy source. Because sometimes the people in the learn field know you can't do it. We have been taught that you can't build a bridge of this type. And still a young man who was an engineer had an idea, and he said, yes, we can build a suspension bridge that'll go across the San Francisco Bay. And he built it. We see those great men. Frank Lloyd Wright, he had an idea to build a house different than anybody else had ever built it in the world. And so he did all his learning, but when it came time for him to do his first private architect, he simply went out and designed a house that the rest of the people in that field said he couldn't do. He had an idea, he put it down on paper, and they built it. And in this day and age, people, you can see that influence of Frank Lloyd Wright in all of the buildings. If you want to see that influence, look at the building in Spokane, Washington that houses the Unity Church. It has that. As I taught in Oak Park, Illinois, where many of his first houses were designed. And as I travel around the United States, I can see his idea floating through, but unless he had written it down, unless he'd done something with it, the world would not have it today. We've seen other people, Letourneau, a fantastic man in the equipment world, a man that looked for the answers and didn't look for the problems. And when it come time to build a machine that hooked together a motor that would pull a rig that would excavate 14 yards of dirt, most of the major equipment builders said it couldn't be done. He said, yes, we can. He took his creative ideas, put them down in a book day after day, then he coordinated them together, drew them into a plan. He built the first scraper and the turnippoles and the big road equipment. He built machines that move mountains because he kept track of his creative ideas. And you see, every one of us in our own way can move mountains. Within our soul, within our business, within our home, we can move those mountains if we will take the creative ideas and spirit within, write them down, and then do something with them. And you must do something with them. I know people who come to me and say, Verl, I've got 32 books already. Have you ever read them? No, I just wrote all those ideas down. You must do your work. At least every 6 months, you've got to go back through those ideas, look them over, restudy them, put like ideas together, dovetail them. Maybe the book is already written. Maybe the plan for the energy source is already there. Maybe it's a simple plan just to increase your business. You see, you can get that idea on the creative thought, how to enhance your business so it'll do 5 times as much while you're playing golf on a golf course or fishing in a fishing hole. You need the book with you. If it's just your marriage, write all the creative ideas down about how to enhance your marriage. Write them down. And at the end of 30 days, coordinate these ideas, then take those and put them into action in your life. And you don't need a counselor. Your mind is counseling 2 years ahead for you. And the beauty is it's your private counseling. It's your ideas. It's yours. Let's pause for just a moment now and think of those ideas in just a brief silence. Begin thinking of the ideas you might have to enhance your life. Just close your eyes and take a deep breath, exhale slowly and relax totally, and think for just a moment. What are some of the ideas? See if they don't start pouring forth. Take a deep breath now, exhale slowly, and be totally aware of all those ideas you had, and stop for just a moment now and make a determination in your mind that you will write those down. Not that you will try. If you try to do it, you'll never get it done. That's the biggest failing word in the vocabulary. I'll try to write my ideas down tomorrow, and you've told yourself you probably won't get it done already. Say, I will write these ideas down. I will become that person who reaches out ahead, master of the soul, master of my ship. You see, there was a little girl in Reno, Nevada, who all her life had dreamed about living in a new home. She dreamed about it. But you see, this is a physical dimension. You have to write those ideas down. Get them out of the dream world. They knew the size of the house, the shape of the house, what color it was going to be, how many bathrooms it was going to have. They knew everything about that house. 18 years, they dreamed about it. How many of us have dreamed about something we want in our life for 18 years and have never done anything about it? And to start is to write those ideas down. So one weekend, at a barbecue or some type of an outdoor function, they were sitting at an outdoor table and telling somebody across the table about the beautiful home they had and the hill they wanted to build it on. And that man happened to be an architect, and he looked across and said, "Why don't you sketch the plans of that house?" He said, "You know, you'll never live in it till you write it down." So they sketched it on the back of a placemat. As they finished sketching it, they handed it to the architect, and 3 weeks later he came back and he said, "Do you want some adjustments here?" And they talked it over and got excited. 3 months later they had the plans, and 3 years later the young lady said, "We don't know how, but we're living in that home." You see, you'll never build that house until you draw the plans. You'll never become the perfect person you want to become. You'll never let those creative ideas express that you want to give to the world until you become an architect of your life and write down your goals, write down your ideas. And these ideas are your goals. You won't have any question about where you're going. And one of the first questions when I go into any group and start talking about goals or about where we're going is, "Verl, I got 1,000 ways to go. I don't know what direction to go." You keep that idea book for 6 months and you will have the direction in your life that you want to go, because it's so simple. If one idea appears in there 102 times in 6 months and the next idea appears in only 82 times, what's that tell you? The mind is already working on this. The mind has already developed it. It knows the way to go. You're just not taking it through the physical dimension. You're not letting it flow out of your hands. You're not creating that book. You see, the book is written. All you got to do is get it out your hand, and then I can read it. And if the mind knows that, it will tell you that because it's dealing in that. And it's those daydream states that it happens. Don't let them slip by. Get the ideas down. Now let's take for a moment and get a practical application once you get these ideas down to make them happen within your life. Because it's like the little girl that has all the ideas, 2,000 books of them, kept them for 20 years, but what do I do with them now, Verl? You better get them down and then use a practical technique to plug them into your life. But the first step, after you listen to this tape, is for a few moments. Go get you a pad, get you a pencil, and begin writing down all of those ideas that you've been keeping in your mind for the last 30 years. And you know, that has a definite benefit. Because if you'll get them out of your mind, then your mind does not have to spend all of the time consciously being concerned about having them in there, remembering these ideas. Write them down on a piece of paper. A young girl in the Spokane class when we were teaching there just a week or so ago sat down with her idea, and she had computer paper that's hooked together and that folds out. In 45 minutes, she filled 12 pages of computer paper with ideas. And her first reaction was, "Wow, I'm free. I've got all of those things I've had to guard and remember I have them in my mind. I now have them on a piece of paper, and it frees my mind up to go on out and begin deciding how to do these things, to work on doing them, not just work on remembering them." So get them out. It simply makes you lighter. It'll make you feel greater the moment you get the ideas down on paper. So make it right now an affirmation that as soon as you finish listening to this tape, you will take time to get a notebook and start writing down all the creative ideas, all the things you would like to do. It doesn't matter what it is. All the wild ideas. If you're walking across a lawn someday and you think somebody should develop a dandelion digger, and this is the way they should do it, write it down. If you're looking in the newspaper and you see a banana ad and you think somebody ought to create a banana peeler, that's wild. Who needs a banana peeler? But write it down in the way you would create that. If you think the new energy source could be the wind or a windmill, write it down. Write it down. Then you have kept them for yourself. In fact, we believe, as you write this down in the physical dimension, that possibly, we have no proof of this, but a theory, that you claim them for your own for 2 years. And if you just think of them, you put them in ethers, and somebody sitting across town says, "Hey, that's a good idea," just picked it up. But if you write them down, you claim them for yourself for approximately 2 years, and if you don't do anything with them then, they go back into the ethers, and the world has the freedom to pick them up and do something with them. So get the ideas down. We cannot emphasize enough. If you would just try this for 30 days, if you'll try it for 90 days, if you'll try it from now, and the tape is being recorded now at the 1st of December, if you can try it now from Christmas, it might be the greatest Christmas present you've ever received in your life. It could give you total new direction. So anything you're not doing now can be considered as an idea. Write it down. Write those stories, then coordinate them, and then a practical application to put them into your life. Relax totally now and just sit back and let your mind circle with me. Let it take in all of your ideas about this as we talk about it, because this will key ideas. You see, it's the law of the vacuum. Nature can't stand a vacuum by law. Nature can't stand a vacuum by law. You have a 24-hour circle, and you walk so much, you talk so much, you sleep so much, you work so much, and there's no vacuums. And you see, if you choose not to sleep, then you're going to do something else. Something fills in there. Now, the paradox is that most of us wait all our life for something new to come into our life. Maybe we've written our ideas down, but we still wait for something new to come into our life. And absolutely nothing new can come into your life until you do walk a little faster, talk a little faster, sleep a little less, create a little vacuum so you can plug something new in. So here's the key with your idea book. Once you have all those ideas down, you separate them on like sheets, and you have them coordinated, and you know that here's an idea that was in 102 times. That's telling you the mind is working on it. All you need to do is to take it now into the conscious world, into the physical dimension, and do something with it. So the idea that appears in your idea book the most after 90 days, plug it into your circle. Make room for it. Just 1 hour a week, 1 hour a day. But you must make it a discipline to start on that, because until you start doing it, it will never do you any good. It can stay in that book forever. So you take it out and you plug it in, and you plug it in a small way. Do not start too big. The fallacy in life for most of us for not accomplishing is that we try to take in too much. We try to reach out and do too much at one time. Start very, very small. Very, very small. Plug it in. And if you can plug it in for an hour a week, if it's right for you. The young man in Spokane plugged in painting for just an hour one Saturday. That took up that much time of his life. Then he plugged in another hour the next week. Then he plugged in another hour the next week. The following week, people had seen his paintings, and they needed or requested more of these paintings, so he had to plug in 2 hours to finish it. Then it was 3, then it was 4. And not long after that, he didn't have to make a decision about the other work he was doing. He just didn't have time to do it. There just wasn't time to do the other one. And now his whole life is a vacation. It's painting, and he dearly loves it, with his own art studio, with the exhibit in Paris, France that will be coming up. You see, he started very, very simple, but he took his own idea, not someone else's, and let it work for him. Let us continue now to talk about how to practically install this into your life to make it happen. And we were talking of that law of the vacuum. You can't have anything new until you actually create a little vacuum in your life and plug it in. Now, it should be small. Let's take just a moment to understand why so many of us perhaps fail in trying to accomplish something in our life. After we get the new creative idea, why don't we do it? Why don't we actually get out and make this happen? Why don't we write that book so other people can read it? Why don't we draw that picture? Why don't we create the new business? We've had the idea in our mind for 10 years. Well, number one, you haven't written the idea down enough. You haven't got it clear within your mind, because when you can't make a decision on it, it usually means that you don't have enough material. You haven't got enough input. So keep the ideas down until 80 or 90 of them are there. You have understanding of what it is, and then plug it in, but plug it in small. You see, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to start small. The psychic, the mind, and you. You can accept that. Think for a moment, how many people who've wanted to learn to fly airplanes have never learned to fly because they're waiting for the day that they can buy the airplane. If you really want to fly an airplane, go out to the airport and start washing aircraft and start changing oil in them and talking to the pilots. And pretty soon you'll get a ride and you'll have enough money to make your first flight, and pretty soon you will be an airplane pilot. But if you wait all of your life, to buy the airplane, you may never fly an airplane. There's some delicious stories that's come out of the class in the last couple of years. Let us share those stories for just a moment. 1 cup of carrot juice. Just 1 cup of carrot juice, a favorite story of mine. Here was a man back in one of the Midwest cities that was taking the class, and he was tremendously overweight. He said, "Verl, I've tried to lose weight all my life." He said, "I need to lose 100 pounds. Have I tried to lose it, and I just can't." He said, "I'm going to forget about this weight problem. I'm just going to buy a 10-speed bicycle and ride it. That's all I'm going to do." And you know, that's fantastic. Quit thinking about the weight. Just get a 10-speed bicycle. Change your life in some way, and it can change this way. So he got a 10-speed bicycle, and he began riding at 5 o'clock every morning. He rode it around the block, and about the 3rd week he was riding this bicycle around the block, he was amazed that he became aware that here was a health food store, and the lights were on, and somebody was in there doing something at 5:30 every morning. So he stopped into the health food store. He went into the store, and the manager of the store was squeezing fresh carrot juice. And it's the most delicious drink in the world when it comes right out of the juice squeezer. And the manager said, "You ever had carrot juice?" He said, "No, I've never had a cup of carrot juice." He said, "Here, have one on me." And he drank the cup of carrot juice, and it was refreshing, and he felt the vitamins. It was good for him. So every morning after that, on his daily routine of an hour of riding a bicycle, he made it a practice to drop in and have 1 cup of carrot juice and go ride his bicycle again. A week or two later, he noticed another man down 2 or 3 blocks doing the same thing, riding a bicycle. And they came very close one morning, and he stopped and he said, "Hi, how are you?" He said, "Have you ever had a cup of carrot juice?" Well, the guy said, "No." And well, he said, "Have you ever tasted?" "No, I've never tasted it." He said, "Well, come on up to the store. There's a guy up here opens the store at 5:30 every morning. He squeezes fresh carrot juice. Come have a cup of carrot juice. I'll buy you one." So they went in, and they had a cup of carrot juice, and they got talking, and both of them were riding bicycles for the same purpose, just to ride them. The heck with the weight, just ride the bicycle. So they drank their cup of carrot juice, and they made it a practice after that to ride together and stop in and have a cup of carrot juice. And talking over this cup of carrot juice each morning, they became quite good friends. And the one fellow said, "Have you ever been fishing?" to the other man. He said, "No, I've never been fishing." He said, "Would you like to go?" He said, "I don't know whether I'd like to go. I have no idea. Never been fishing." Well, he said, "I own a 27-foot sloop," or whatever the boat was. He said, "Why don't you and your wife come and we'll pack a picnic lunch and go out and just fish next weekend?" He said, "I'll do it." So over the cup of carrot juice, they made that appointment, and they went out and went fishing. He had a delicious day. He had a fantastic day. It was good. It was one of his natural talents, something that he had never written down in an idea book, just didn't have an idea he wanted to do. But it was there. And as a result of that, he was fishing more and more. He fished in a tournament down in the Gulf, and he won that tournament. Turned on and totally surprised by this new thing in his life. So he then got information on other tournaments around the United States and around the world. He went and fished in a couple of more. He was successful in both of those tournaments. He is now traveling the world, fishing tournaments and writing stories for magazines and newspapers about the fishing tournament because he had 1 cup of carrot juice. 1 cup of carrot juice. And how many of us wait all our life, so that we can go fish in that big fishing tournament, and we never get out and change our life, never get ourselves started. So the point is 1 cup of carrot juice. Use this to start in your life. 1 cup of carrot juice can change your life. If you've never played tennis, 1 tennis racket and a tennis ball can change your life. You don't have to play tennis. Buy a tennis racket and a tennis ball and go out and sit on the bench at the end of the tennis court. Sit there for 3 Sundays in a row, and you're going to have new friends. Somebody's going to come over and ask you, "Hey, what do you do with that tennis ball? Do you play tennis?" "Never played tennis in my life." You're going to get a new input into your life, and that can change your life. It's like the girl in Tacoma, Washington that came up from California. just 2 weeks before she participated in an Alpha Awareness seminar. She came to Tacoma to change her life, to make a new life. And as she was in the class the second or the third day, she said, "Verl, I've had a tremendous urge to go fishing." And I said, go, it'll change your life. She said, "I've never fished in my life. I don't know what a fish looks like. I've never had a pole in my hand." Doesn't matter. I said, "Go fishing." She went down and bought a 350 cane pole or something like that and went fishing, and the next day she came in with a sparkle in her eyes and said, "Absolutely fantastic. I've had one of the most delicious days I've ever had in my life." She said, "I went out and went fishing." Now, this young woman had just gone through a divorce. It was a new life. She's seeking out new friends. She said, "I not only caught a fish, and I breathed the clear air over in this, next to the seashore." She said, "I met 3 young men who seemed very interesting. And I met one person that's given me all the fishing holes in the whole Northwest." She said, "I had one of the most fabulous days of my life." And she said, "Verl, I'm taking my children fishing next Sunday." You see, she has a new way of life because she took an idea and implemented it on a small scale. If you get the idea and it comes out in your idea book that you want to be a fisherman, don't go out and buy a $30,000 boat. For the first week, just go out 1 hour a week and watch them fish. Get some magazine and read about fishing. And if that turns you on, then let's approach it again. The next week, take 2 hours. Buy a fishing pole, one of $4 or $5 or $6, and a little fly reel, and go out and try fishing on the bank or with someone. And if that be right for you, pretty soon you'll be fishing 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours in your life. It can take your life over. So 1 cup of carrot juice, 1 cigarette changed a person's life. There was that delicious story that was in Reader's Digest not long ago. Let me share it with you. There was a vicar, or vicar, however you pronounce it, in the church in England. And as the story goes, and I remember it, once a vicar, always a vicar. Otherwise it was a job where you came in and you were selected in this position of sort of a custodian and doing certain things within the church. It was your job for life. You never had to have concern of security. So he went ahead with this job, and he was married, and the family came along, and he continued and continued until he was, as I remember, in the ages of 35 or 40. And the new administration came into the church, and they heard that he couldn't read nor write. So the new administration called him in. They had an interview, and he said, "We understand you can't read nor write." And he said, "That's right. I've never learned to read nor write." And he said, "In fact, I can't sign my name." And the administration said, "Well, if you can't do that, you could make mistakes, and we can't afford mistakes, so you will have to either learn to read or write in 90 days or get a new job." And he very quickly said, "Well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I don't agree with that." But he said, "You can't." So he said, I'll have to get a new occupation. That'll be all there is to it." Now, he didn't panic. He didn't get upset. Most of us would have locked into the problem after 30 years of working at one job. "My gosh, I'm finished for life. I can't read and write." No, he simply made a little vacuum in his circle, and he knew that if he could get 1 cigarette and smoke it, he didn't smoke and he didn't inhale, but he knew if he could just puff on a cigarette, that it relaxed him. So he went out and started walking down the street, not thinking of the problem, but looking for a place to buy a cigarette. And he walked 1 block and there was no door, and he walked 2 blocks and there was no doors or store to buy a cigarette. As I remember, it seems like 12 or 14 blocks, there was no place to buy a cigarette. And he finally found a store that furnished tobacco. So he walked in and he got his cigarettes and he lit one up and walked down the street puffing on that. And he thought, there ought to be a tobacco store closer to the church. Up in that area of town, there really should be one. He went on home and he lit another cigarette and puffed on it. He told his wife about what had happened. She panicked just a little bit, and he said, "No, just leave me alone." He said, "I'm going to smoke another cigarette here." And he said, there's something. He began looking for the ideas. He began writing down a few notes. The next day he went down, and as he was puffing on another cigarette, he looked for empty buildings next to the church, and right in that same block there was one that looked just right. So he, out of his savings, leased it and started a tobacco newspaper stand. To make a long story short, pretty soon he had 2 stands, and then he had 3 stands, and then he had 4 stands, 5, 6, whatever the number came. And a number of years later, the banker called him in and said, "Do you know that you have 30,000 pounds in the bank?" And I believe that the exchange rate at that time was 5 to 1, so a pretty good chunk of money, if we want to convert it to dollars. And the banker says, I think you ought to invest these in stocks and bonds. I think maybe you ought to invest these. He said, oh, no, I don't know anything about that. He said, I can't. Well, the guy said, take these home and read them at least. He said, I can't read. He said, you can't read? He said, no, I can't write either. You can't write? He said, yes, all I can do is sign my name. I can write that much. I had to do that to take care of my shops. And the banker looked at him and he said, my God, man, what would you have been if you had have learned to read and write? He paused for a moment and he said, I know that, and I can tell you, I would have been a vicar in the church. Now, the beauty of that story is, you see, without looking at the problem, one cigarette did what for this man's life? It changed his whole life. Instead of getting locked into the problem, panicking into the problem, he just simply went out and got one cigarette, and it changed his total life. Anything new you do will change your life. If you've never rented a motorhome and toured across the United States or taken a weekend vacation, it'll change your life. One housewife said, Verl, I've written down my ideas, and she said, I want to change my life. I want to do something. I want to put more input into my family. And she said, you know, one of the wild ideas, and this was quite a portly lady, she said, one of my ideas that keeps coming is I want to ride motorcycles. I want a motorcycle. And I said, okay, do something about it. And you know, the next time I came back, she had a smile on her face, and she said, you know, wow. I was going by, soon after I talked to you, a Kawasaki motorcycle place, and I thought, fantastic, and I went in and I bought one on time. And I took it home, and she said, it certainly changed my life. When I told my husband and the 3 children I bought a Kawasaki, my life changed at that moment. She said, we haven't ridden the Kawasaki very much, but we've been to 3 rallies, and we have friends all over the world. We usually just take it up to the rally, and it's such a beautiful thing. We spend most of our time polishing it, and the children are not big enough to ride it yet. And she said, one Kawasaki has changed our life. There was a young man who came to me in one of the southwest towns of the United States. He said, Verl, I've got a business. And he said, I've done your idea book. He said, I've written down all the ideas, and I know what it is, and I've got a good business, and I've been to 12 different cities, and every time after about 6 or 8 months, I start to go downhill, and I'm fearful of bankruptcy. And he said, it's happening again here. What can I do? And out of the blue, just out of the blue, I thought, tell him to get a water ski and go water skiing. So I said, buy a water ski and go water skiing. Just something to change his life from being locked in on the problem. Fantastic thing happened. He said, Verl, I'm going bankrupt, and you're telling me to get a water ski. He said, that's too far out. I said, I don't know why, but get a water ski. He said, I don't water ski. I've never water skied. I don't know if I want a water ski. It doesn't matter. Get a water ski and go out to where they water ski. Do you know where it is? He said, yes. So he took this idea. He bought himself one water ski and went out and stood on the pier. And he said, Verl, I stood there all Sunday. The boats went by. Everybody was waving at me and so on. And he said, nobody stopped to talk, so I just stood there with my water ski. And he said, the next weekend I went back out and stood there with my water ski, and finally a guy waved at me and turned his boat around and come back and said, what are you doing? Well, he said, I'm just standing here with my water ski. He said, well, why are you doing it? He said, I really don't know why I'm standing here with my water ski. Some guy told me to do this. Well, he said, do you want to learn to water ski? He said, I really don't know. I want to learn to water ski. Well, he said, why don't you get in the boat? I can't stand seeing you stand there. He said, everybody here is talking about you. Get in the boat. Let's go water skiing. So they went out, and he said, don't you have 2 skis? He said, no, he only told me to buy one. Only got one water ski. Well, he said, here, you better take mine, even though they don't match. He said, you better take my one single ski, because the first time up, you ought to try to learn on 2. So with mismatched skis, the guy towed him. Other people gathered around. They had a delicious day water skiing. The next day, he bought himself another ski, and he went out as a guest of this person again, and he was among the water skiing crowd. And, of course, what happened here was they said, well, what do you do? And he said, well, I'm a salesman. This was my product. And they said, wow, we need that. You see, what had come to me is that the product that he was selling, there was a certain clientele that needed that product, a certain economic strata, so to speak. And those people who are water skiing are in a certain strata. Now, if you're playing golf 3 days a week, you're in a different strata. You've already bought that product. He needed to go out and associate with these people in a group that needed his product. His problem was he was trying to look through 300 or 400,000 people in the phone book and seek each one of them out where they were living. And here they were all put together for him in the field of water skiing. His business increased 700% in 90 days because he bought a water ski and went out and stood on the dock. So you see, you start it simple. If you want to learn to water ski, don't go by the boat. Buy a water ski, stand on the dock. If it's right for you, you'll get some water skiing in. Then you can decide when you want a boat. This is true of starting something or stopping something. Mentally digest. Be totally aware of what we're saying here. Start small. If you want to lose 100 pounds, why don't you lose it 10 pounds at a time, but do something about it? Write it down. Get your idea down in the physical dimension, then take an hour a week to work on, or an hour a day to work on losing just 10 pounds. Another delicious story. This happened in Oak Park, Illinois. There was a man who came to me and he said, "Verl, I tried all my life to quit smoking. All my life to quit smoking, and I just couldn't do it." He said, "One day I was in the office and the phones were ringing and the hassle was going on, and I looked down and I thought, I just got to have a cigarette." So he said, I lit a cigarette and I looked down and there was 5 cigarettes burning in the ice tray. 5 cigarettes. And he thought, my God, can't I stop smoking just for 1 minute? Just for 1 minute? And he thought, yes, I can quit. So he said he snuffed them all out. And he said, I quit smoking for 1 minute. That wasn't too tough, so he said, then I quit smoking for 2 minutes. That wasn't too tough, so I quit then for 10 minutes. Then I quit for an hour. Then I quit for 2 hours. He said, then I quit for half a day. Then I quit for a whole day. And as a result, he's a non-smoker. So if you want to take a habit out of your life, remember, your circle has no vacuums. The first thing you've got to do is to get your idea book, write down the plans. You've got to dig the trenches. It's so important. You've got to have a trench within your mind to follow. Once you have that trench, you have the ideas written down, then you must plug it in and plug it in a small way so you can believe in it. And don't we all do that? Let me give you a personal experience. I've always wanted 40 cups of carrot juice at once all my life. And how many things I've bypassed or haven't done yet because I'm waiting for the day that I can have it all at one time. It's like land investment. Last year, looking at land up around Blaine, Washington, there was beautiful investment potentials there. And so with a real estate agent one day that I dearly loved and entrusted myself to, we went out and we started looking at land, and we looked at 10 acres, and then we looked at 20 acres, and we looked at 30 acres, and I got more excited. We looked at 50, and we finally looked at 200. And at the 200 acres, I said, that's what I want. So I put my money down on that in option. And last December, when it come time to exercise that option, I recognized that that land was going to run me. I was not going to run it. And I absolutely will not have anything in my life at this point that runs me. I shall run that. My dad was a beautiful rancher, fantastic man, but that ranch ran him. He loved it, but it ran him. The mortgage was due in December. The ranch took the money. Would there be enough for Christmas? The cows had to be fed every day, and he had to be there to feed them. I'll own a ranch again someday, but I'm going to run that ranch. It's not going to run me. And that's true of all of your life. So we must start with 1 cup of carrot juice. You see, I wanted 40 gallons and 200 acres. So when it come time to exercise the option, I gave them the money. Now I've released it with no fear. And perhaps it'll come so I can exercise the option later. Don't know whether I want to exercise the option. Because I've realized all my life I try for 40 cups of carrot juice at once. You see, if 3 years ago when I looked at the first 10-acre piece, if I'd have bought it and I could have paid cash for it, I would have had them split that and sell it, and then buy 20 acres and split that and sell that, and another 20 acres and split that and sell that. 1 cup of carrot juice at a time, I would own that 200 acres today, which I desire to own. But you must start with 1 cup of carrot juice. Let it unfold. But the first thing is you have to get those ideas down. Now this tape will do you no good. It'll actually do you absolutely no good until you put these techniques to work in your life. So number 1, you must go out and buy some idea books. And they just need to be notebooks, that's all. But get enough of them. And if you drive a lot, get a tape recorder for your car. Then you must take those things from the tape and put them down in idea books, and then make it a discipline. Decide that at least every 6 months, and it should be every 2 months, to review and put all like ideas together. Make sure you detail these ideas enough that you can actually remember what they meant when you begin to look at these. Then the idea that appears in there the most in 30 days, plug it in. Plug it into your circle in a small way and see what begins to happen. You see, it changed my life without even being aware of the technique. I was 328 pounds, very heavy. I hadn't been fishing in years, and I knew something was wrong. So I went out of that 24-hour circle that I was performing in, and I took Dale Carnegie. It'll be very simple. I took Dale Carnegie, and I took a half hour that first night for an opening lecture. That's all I stayed. But I signed up for the class, which was 4 hours a night, I believe, for 2 weeks. So in my 24-hour circle, I have 4 hours gone now. After I took the course, and then I signed up for another type of course in Dale Carnegie and another one, I took 3 types of courses. People began to see a difference, and then they said, "Verl, what's happening in your life?" And I said, "Dale Carnegie, it's working. It's simply working for me." They said, "Would you tell us about it?" And I said, "I'd be happy to share my ideas with you." So I went down one Saturday night, and we stayed till 2 o'clock in the morning talking about these things that were working for me, and people got excited. They said, "Verl, if we get these people together, would you just come share your ideas in this area?" Well, I said, yes, I'd be happy to. So then they got the people together for a whole Saturday and a Sunday afternoon. You see what's happening to my 24-hour circle? It's being utilized now in a different way because I went to Dale Carnegie for 1/2 hour. Pretty soon, one of those people said, "Verl, if we get these people together for a week, 2 hours a night for a week, and we all give you $10, would you teach the class?" I said, "Certainly." Not Dale Carnegie, but just simply that unfolding of what was happening in my life. So I shared the ideas, that's all. It was about 6 months later, somebody called from Reno, Nevada, who had been in this group, and said, "Verl, if we can get 100 people together at $100, would you come to Reno and teach that class?" I said, "Would I?" I taught Alpha Awareness to begin with for money. I teach it for money yet, but I teach it for much more at this point. It's life, it's spirit, it's beauty. Anyway, then they heard about what happened there. They said, "Would you come to Las Vegas?" A class sprang up in Las Vegas. I'm down there teaching. Then somebody from Ogden, Utah said, "Would you go to Ogden?" A class sprang up there. There was one in Casper, Wyoming. There was one in Twin Falls. And I was renting a private aircraft to fly home every Monday morning to sit on the Board of Supervisors because I was a member and had been a member for 7 years at this point of that body. Flying over the high Sierras, as I tipped the nose of the plane down one morning, I thought, "You know, Verl, your circle is so full that you're kidding yourself. You don't have time to be a supervisor anymore." You see, from 1/2 hour at Dale Carnegie, Alpha Awareness had taken over, so it occupied every hour of my life, and I didn't have to make a decision. That morning, as I tipped the plane down to go in for a landing at San Andreas, California, just the daylight coming over the Sierras, the snow-capped peaks, and my resignation flowed out, and I knew it was perfect. I went in, dictated the resignation, resigned that day, went home at lunch and told my wife I wasn't working in that area anymore. Got in the plane, went back, and from that day on, my life has been a total vacation. I didn't have to make a decision because I wrote down my ideas, and then I did 1 cup of carrot juice. I started small. So for just a moment now, close your eyes, take a deep breath. Exhale very, very slowly and mentally repeat the word relax several times. Take another deep breath. Exhale very slowly. And mentally repeat the word I am. And another deep breath, and as you exhale slowly, mentally repeat the word within. Turning within now to the inner conscious awareness. And take just a moment now to look at your life and let the ideas begin to form. And above all, say the affirmation, "I will write down my ideas. I will start today, at this moment, to find out those keys to successes that have been with me all my life. I shall keep my ideas, write them down. And every 30 to 60 days, I will review these ideas and put the like ideas together. And from that, I will know which direction I wish to take, which cup of carrot juice I wish to add into my circle. And then I will take time, 1 hour a week, 1 hour a month, 1 hour a day, to start that new thing within my life. And as I start that new thing that is right for me, I will be excited. I will be happy. My life will become that vacation that I desire. That new business has already been created. I just need to write it down and be aware of it. That new love in my marriage has already been created. It's nothing new. It's always been there. I must be aware of it. And as I write my ideas down and put them together, I now become aware of that new beauty and love in my marriage. I become aware of that beauty in my friends and in my neighbor. I come aware of all those things in my life I wish to do, and I will record them. Then I will take the most important, make a vacuum in my circle, write it down, apply it with discipline, 1 hour a week, 1 hour a day, 1 hour a month. And if it's right for me, the guidance will set in, and my life becomes that vacation that I desire. And with that affirmation, let's slowly stretch up now, putting our hands over our head. Slowly open your eyes. Take a deep breath. Exhale slowly, wide awake, feeling fine and in perfect health. And I know my life takes on new meaning, new feeling, new happiness as I use this special technique. And for that we say thank you. Thank you. And have a good day. In fact, have a perfect forever.